They just don't have product market fit. So don't think product market fit going wrong means that you suck. It really doesn't. It just means you need to keep trying something else.
Even the best people in the world have a dud that happens.
You're listening to Biz Buzz. Super authentic, actionable advice.
We're going to open the kimono and show you what's inside.
I'm scared to see inside Mike's kimono.
Hey, it's Mike and Tom with Biz Buzz.
If you like geeking out over business, marketing, and entrepreneurship, this is the podcast for you.
We're in the middle of coronavirus quarantine. Things are easing, at least where I am right now. I'm not in a state that has a high incident level of cases. How are things for you over there?
We are still in lockdown. We're in the very early phases of easing that. And I think most people are of the volition of like, we're going to kind of, stay in self-imposed lockdown and just see what happens.
Careful. Yeah.
Because we're pretty badly hit in the UK, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. We're being careful, even though some things are easing. I haven't sat inside a restaurant to eat food, but I have gone through drive-through lately. All right. This is completely not on topic. To get back on topic, today we're going to be talking about product market fit. And this is a topic that Tom has had a lot of passion around lately. I think he's done some other content relating to this. And we're going to turn the time over to Tom to kick us off with this conversation about what does this mean, product market fit, and we'll kind of just churn through there.
Yeah, so I don't even know what the official definition is, but the way I think about product market fit is quite simply how much the market you're serving wants whatever it is you're selling. And this is woven through so many conversations that we have. We talk a lot about niching and audience and selling, and all of these things only really work if you have product market fit. If you have a terrible product market fit, it kind of doesn't matter what else you do. You can just beat your marketing over and over and over again. And if the market you're trying to sell to has no interest in what you're selling, you're screwed. And that is not as uncommon as you might think. I actually think a huge majority of entrepreneurs either experience that now or have experienced that at some point, where they're just flogging a dead horse, as the pretty grim expression goes. And what gets me is often they are talented. It's not a lack of talent. They're great at what they do, but they're just trying to push something that is never going to work. And so that's where you get that endless feeling of pushing the boulder up the hill and that eternal struggle. And you kind of think like, God, it should be easier than this.
Yeah.
Right.
I think for me, some initial thoughts are it's not just having a product that fits a certain market, but it's having a product positioned in a way that somebody is willing to buy it. Somebody's willing to part with money to acquire this service or this product. And this is, I think, where a lot of people run into trouble. They paint pictures and the pictures are awesome and they're beautiful, but it's not, there's the magic isn't there that makes somebody want to part with their money to have it. But if they bundle it with a cause, if they bundle it with, proceeds go to X charity or something like that, now all of a sudden somebody feels willing to part with their money to purchase the thing. And I think there are a lot of people out there selling services and products that people expect to be free, or there's nothing that differentiates them in a way that somebody would part with the money. You see this in social media engagement as well, where somebody is posting content and nobody's engaging. Well, it's not striking a nerve. I think that maybe that's the summary of it. It's got to strike a nerve that makes somebody say, oh, I need this enough to buy it. Oh, I love this enough to comment. There's something relating to that in this product market fit as well.
Yeah, it's so true. And we did a whole episode on differentiation and how to work those angles and find a good entry into a market. So like I say, a lot of the chats we've had, Mike, circle around this, but I think a lot of people don't really think about it in that nutshell format of product market fit. For me, it's the most important thing that entrepreneurs and creatives should be focused on. And it's the same way I have coaching students whereby they will try selling 10 different products in their store and 9 of them fail and one just flies.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that has the product market fit. There's actually, she wasn't a coaching student. She was like a friend of a friend. But there was a girl that I know who is making like little cute frames and gifts and stuff like that. And she had the idea of getting wooden crates, which she then spray painted red and then put fake snow in, and then used a little stencil on the spray paint to spray paint a kid's name on the side in a bespoke fashion. And these were called like Santa's gift boxes. So she sold all these different products. Some had done okay. Plenty of them hadn't done well. She landed on this product idea in the run up to Christmas, and she sold them faster than she could make them. She had to enlist all her friends to come and help. And she called her friends her little elves. And they were working around the clock, producing these custom bespoke Santa boxes. And, you know, just huge product market fit for that product. Did she get more talented overnight? You know, did she get smarter? No, she just, you know, she kept trying stuff until she found product market fit.
I love that. And there's something in that. The Santa box by itself, just as pretty, just as creative, just as interesting, but would have sold few if it wouldn't have been for the stencil name on the box, the personalization. That was the thing that made somebody say, oh, I need this. I'm willing to part with my money to acquire this product. It was the personalization. So a lot of times in product market fit, it's just tweaking this dial just so much to hit that magic moment when somebody's willing to engage and part with money to acquire it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I feel like both of us, when we coach people, it's often the tweaks. It's not that people are doing a completely horrible job. It's like, well, why don't you just try it from that angle? Or why don't you just adjust how you sell it in that small way? And yeah, those small tweaks can really just unlock everything. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you do it? So let's take maybe a test project or something through this process of identifying, validating market demand. Why don't we run something through this gamut? You've got a new product X, your widget. What do you do to try and determine product market fit?
So the biggest thing that I do is validation. I'm such an enormous fan of validation. I just do it endlessly with everything. People don't often realize. Validation is basically you quickly surmising if the market wants what it is you're thinking about selling before you make it, or before you properly make it. So to use a metaphor, this is what they do with pilots for TV shows. They don't go and invest millions in this gigantic budget producing this giant show. They go and cheaply and quickly make a pilot, and then they see what the reaction is. If it's good, it's like, great, we've validated that people like this thing. Now we're going to go invest the budget and do it at scale. So I do this all the time. Like I did it with, I've got a private Facebook group for my newsletter people. I didn't just go and make that. I sent a newsletter out, or I included in a wider newsletter. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this group. Respond to this email if you're interested. Biggest response from any newsletter. Just tons. My inbox got flooded with people being like, oh my God, yes, I want this Facebook group. So I knew when I launched it, it would be well received and people would like it. So what you're doing with validation is you are essentially reducing the risk that what you put out into the market is going to fail. You're going in with a degree of confidence and a reasonable prediction that it's actually going to perform decently.
Okay, I love that. So you make a minimum viable product, an MVP of some kind. And we're not talking about an app where you're distilling it down to 3 features instead of 30 that you have planned for the future. We're talking about just a minimum viable product for anything that you're doing. Before your example of the Santa boxes, before she went and hired her elves and created this assembly line, she could have made one, and she probably did, and posted the one that she spent 2 hours making and getting it just right in her brain, and then testing to see if she can sell the one before she goes and produces the 3,000 that she sold leading up to Christmas, or however many it was. So
Yeah.
this is the idea of testing the waters before you go all in on your specific service. And I've done a lot of coaching sessions lately. In fact, this week was the niching week. People saying, I'm not sure what my niche is. How do I figure out my niche? Well, the same exact way. Create a test service offering and then approach 10 people in that niche and see their response before you go and restructure your entire business around that niche with the hope and expectation that it's going to work. Go and drip test your niche first.
Yeah, I think there are so many ways to do validation and minimum viable products. And really, it's your imagination and creativity are the only limits. So that's a perfect example. I think Tim Ferriss, spoke about this, and many have done it. You can actually run some very low scale, cheap Facebook ads or Instagram ads pointing to a landing page with something like a basic email sign up. So you could say, hey, we're working on this, show your interest. And then you run a bunch of different campaigns for your different ideas. And you say, oh, cool. That one easily beat the others. You've got 10 times as many signups and 12 times as many clicks. Clearly, that's what the market wants most. And you can do that for a few dozen or a few $100s.
Yeah. You mentioned another example that you have done. You've mentioned this in the past in testing a piece of content on Twitter with your 144 characters before you go and make an Instagram carousel out of it, which could take your designer a couple hours to put together. So test this idea. I have an idea for a piece of content. Test it on Twitter, 144 characters. How does it respond on Twitter? Did it get more engagement than your last post on Twitter? And if so, then that's validation enough for you to say, okay, it's worth spending the bigger effort to create carousel content around that, or video content, or something that takes more time.
And I think that has worked 100% of the time for me. Literally every time a tweet has blown up and got shared loads, and then I put the same exact tweet on Instagram or adjusted it into a carousel or a different type of format, it has never failed to be one of my top performing bits of content.
Yeah.
Ever. It's so predictable. You're like, oh, people like it there. They're going to like it there.
Yeah. Good. All right. Here's another idea that I have relating to product market fit. You mentioned validation. So you validate a smaller idea or a minimum viable product to a smaller market before you spend the time rolling it to a bigger market. That's the summation of this section that we just talked about. The next one I want to talk about is research. And this is the way that I help people validate a niche or validate an idea. Let's say that you have the plans to be a brand studio. You want to do branding for as an agency service, and you want to target pizza shops, pizza restaurants. So you start by doing research. You look on Google and say, how many pizza restaurants are in the United Kingdom? How many pizza restaurants are in London? You get that number, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it's 5,000 pizza restaurants in London. And your goal is to brand pizza restaurants. Now you have to go and say, okay, how many of those pizza restaurants will need a rebrand each year? Okay, let's say 5% of those pizza restaurants need a rebrand each year, which gives us 250 potential customers for a rebrand if we're going to target pizza restaurants in London.
And just to jump in for a sec, if you don't mind, as you're doing that research, I talked recently about it was your RARA, right? It was like your real engaged, relevant audience. The same thing applies with potential clients. So as you're researching the pizza people. It's not just what are the chances of needing a rebrand. It's like, which ones actually have a great brand already? So how many of them look hideous
Yeah.
and clearly need your help, and how
Okay.
many are actually perfect and probably don't need your help, and you can discount them.
Yeah. Great point. So we say we distill this down to 250 that might need our help. They're either looking for a rebrand or their brand is terrible. We've taken the 5,000, we've put it to 5%. Now we look at that and say, okay, we have a 250 potential client pool. How many of those can we realistically land as a client? In the sea of competitive landscape here, how did you like that? Sea of competitive landscape.
It's beautiful.
It's mixed metaphors all over
Dickensian,
the place. It's so good. So the sea of competitive landscape, let's say you can land 1 to 2%. That's what I usually tell people. Let's try and get 1% of the potential client base. And if we can make it on 1% and create a viable business, then there's probably a niche for us to go after here. So in this situation, you distilled this down to 250 total pizza restaurants, and 1% of those is 2.5 potential clients if you market to pizza restaurants in the UK.
Or in London, yeah.
Or in London, yeah. London was the number. So we say 5,000, 250 have a bad brand or want a rebrand. You're going to land 1% of those. That's 2.5 potential clients. Now, if you need to generate $100,000 a year in income, then you have to charge $50,000 per rebrand to those 2.5 clients that you land. So this is kind of how you go and validate whether that niche is viable or not. Mm-hmm. Now, what do you do?
You can actually look them up and think, well, how much revenue are they making? Which in the UK is typically something you can publicly check by a company's house and so on. And you can say, well, they're not going to spend 50 grand on a rebrand because they're a tiny business.
Yeah. So then what do? You tweak the dials to figure out a new way to capitalize on a niche. And maybe you're so in love with pizza restaurants that you say, you know what? I grew up in a pizza restaurant. My parents own one. I've eaten more pizza than any human on the planet. So I really want to do something for pizza restaurants. So you look at this and say, okay, I have a potential of 2.5 clients if I'm just doing rebrand. Well, what if I open it up and say not just London, but now we're in the UK? Now how many pizza restaurants are there? And does that give me a viable audience potential of 6 clients in the year? And then I might say, you know what? Maybe I have to expand to all of Europe. And how many pizza restaurants are in Europe, and I can use my location in the UK to expand into these other countries. So I expand the potential customer base. That's one option. Another option is to expand the services you're offering. You're looking at it and saying, okay, I really wanted to do branding for pizza restaurants, but that doesn't seem viable unless I go worldwide. So why don't I stay in London and market to these 2.5 potential clients that I'm going to get this year, but I become their outsourced marketing agency? Would they spend 50 grand or 30 grand a year on marketing if I'm doing all their lunch specials, all their tent labels, all their posters, all their branded events, and who knows what else they need, menu redesigns? Can I get that much money out of them? So this to me is how you go and start doing this research to try and determine whether this is a viable niche or not. And so many entrepreneurs don't do this. They just say to themselves, they jump in and they say, you know what? I love this idea. I know it's right. They convince themselves that it's right.
This is the people on Dragon's Den, or as you guys call it, Shark Tank, where they say, I've been trying this for 8 years and I put in 200 grand of my own money and no one cares, but I'm sure, it's going to happen anytime now. And then they have to tell them, they're like, you're wasting your life.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it's because they've believed their own story and not done the research to validate the niche. And they've not done a minimum viable product to validate the niche. Although on Shark Tank and Dragon's Den,
Yeah.
Dragon, yeah, on Dragon's Den, they have done the test project product. They have gone to market,
Yeah.
and they still don't believe that the results, that nobody
Crazy.
wants this thing.
Yeah. The market will chew you up and spit you out. Like the market is, it can be amazing, but the market is harsh. The market does not care about you in the slightest, right? Unless you can serve it incredibly well and give it what it wants, the market doesn't care about you.
Yeah.
And by the way, in Mike's example, he said only 5% would, have ugly designs and need your work. It would be more like 95% in the real world
Okay,
because there's a lot
maybe.
of ugly restaurants out there.
But how
But
many
for
of
this
those
example,
feel,
yeah.
how many of those feel the pain of their ugliness to the point where they would spend money on it? That's the
Mhm.
question, because a lot of restaurants they look at their signage, they look at their logo and their brand, and they think, you know what, it's fine. I've got butts in the chairs.
Yeah.
And so they don't feel enough pain to spend money on the problem.
And this is where this is the most key work. You really have to figure out and define your audience or the clients that you're trying to serve, because this will not be the only parameter. It will be things like, well, if they're struggling too much, then they're not going to have the money to afford you.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're doing too well, they think they don't need you. So there's quite possibly a happy middle ground. And the same will apply. Well, if they're making this much revenue, they're not going to be big enough. If they're making this much, they might be out of reach. You might not be able to do it for Pizza Hut, but you can do it for like Joe's Pizzas down the road kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the more you immerse yourself in learning this market, and a lot of this only comes from having conversations and getting shut down and figuring why, people have objections and don't want your services and so on, you will just refine and refine and refine your ideal client profile until you have a super clear idea. And then when you're getting systematic about the future research you do for potential clients, you can literally have a checklist of like, well, unless they fulfill these 20 points, they're probably not going to convert. And you get smarter and smarter and more laser targeted and focused, whether it's pitching, targeting them with Facebook ads, whatever it might be, you just refine and refine. I feel like that's a whole episode in itself, but that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah. And it is all about refinement and tweaking those dials over time and paying attention to the reality of what's happening as you experiment. Experiment, that's a word we haven't used in this episode yet, but man, marketing is experimentation. Marketing any product, getting a product to market is experimentation. It's tweaking the dials always. And you should be watching all the numbers, pay attention to them, believe what they're telling you. Don't believe your own hype. Believe what the numbers are really telling you, and tweak the dials until you find the right solution. This is the idea with the stenciled name on the Santa box. That was the catalyst. That was the tweak that turned a product that would have sold hardly any into a high demand product that turned into a sustainable holiday business and perhaps beyond.
And a lot of what we're talking about so far this episode is about being proactive. It's about validating, going out, seeing what the market thinks. This will actually naturally happen when you're putting out stuff, be it product, services, or content. You should be paying attention all the time to what people resonate with. So with the stuff you're already sharing, I guarantee some of it will naturally do better than other things, right, that you share.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people continue just to blunder forward blindly, ignoring that fact, and just keep kind of doing whatever. They don't look for the patterns where it's like, every time I share this, people engage 3 times better than everything else I do. Maybe I should do more stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think a good way to think about this stuff is it's like the path of least resistance. And I've talked about this before, right? If something just kind of feels naturally like it's working better and it's that much easier, well, go down that path for a bit. And then maybe 3 more paths open up and you try them. And that one on the left feels, easier again. So it's like, cool, I'm going to go down there. Don't constantly feel like you have to be fighting and having this, painful friction as an entrepreneur. Yes, you need to grind it out as an entrepreneur. Yes, you need to work super hard, but it doesn't mean your whole life needs to be a struggle. It's like, pay attention to what feels easier.
If you have the right product market fit, the problem with the boulder changes. The boulder starts rolling so fast up the hill that you can barely keep up with it. And yes, it's still a grind, and yes, it's still a problem, but you're not forcing the boulder up the hill. You're now chasing it, and your problem is different. You're running up the hill and you're getting exhausted from the chase, but it's not because of the labor of pushing it. So the right product market fit is going to be the Santa box, where all of a sudden the orders start flooding in so much that, yes, she's got to grind it out as an entrepreneur. She has to create an assembly line with all of her friends building Santa boxes to keep up with demand. That's a grinding entrepreneurial life, keeping up with your success. So you're going to have the grind. That's Entrepreneur 101. Try and make it the grind of trying to keep up with demand rather than the grind of trying to force your product down the throat of an unwilling consumer. Different.
'Cause it's not fun.
Because it's not fun. And it isn't hard. If you've got the right thing, things take off. If you've got the right product, things will take off, and it won't be just this miserable push.
So my company, Design Cuts, is a perfect example of this. Even though we worked for a few months, in the scheme of things, that was our minimum viable product. We hacked together this site. It was on something called Premise, which doesn't even exist anymore. You know, not WordPress or no, it was like a WordPress plugin or something. It was like the cheapest, lamest, quickest thing we could build that would still work. You know, it wasn't a fancy site. I had all these big ideas and we just stripped them all out and went, nah, we don't have time for that right now. We don't even know if this is going to work. So we put it together. We put our first deal out into the world. And in the first 2 weeks, it sold 1,000 copies of that first product. Wow. And we went, holy crap, we've got product market fit. And it took off like a rocket. So to use your boulder analogy, it literally felt like a rocket had taken off and I was just holding on for dear life, trying to not screw it up and trying to steady the course.
Yeah, that was my life too, growing my agency. You know, these first few years I was just freelancing for my friends, and then all of a sudden the referrals started to happen and I started to feel like, oh my gosh, the demand. I doubled my billings like 2 or 3 years in a row in the early years of my agency. And it was so much work and so much demand that I could barely keep up with it. I couldn't hire fast enough. I couldn't find talent fast enough to produce it. And I was just a slave to this business. That's what everybody's looking for. But why did that happen to me? It was product market fit. I was filling a void in the marketplace of being a cost-effective solution for high-profile entertainment brands. That's what I was. That was the niche I was filling. And I was doing it with a customer service mindset of bending over backwards to hit deadlines instead of pushing back arrogantly on my clients, the way that a lot of agencies, Hollywood-style agency life is the pushback and the arrogance and the push. No offense to anybody working in Hollywood agency world, but you know, it's notorious. It's notorious.
Watch sunglasses inside right now.
Yeah, we'll watch any movie about Hollywood, and there is that vibe in a lot of people, and so not that it's everybody. Again, not trying to offend any of my Hollywood friends.
Don't alienate the listeners. Like, we don't have enough yet. We need everyone we can get.
Well, hopefully the ones who are actually listening to this, we're good friends already, and you know, I have a lot of relationships in that world. Anyway, blah blah blah. The success becomes a challenge to keep up with. So I think you're saying the path of least resistance. If you hit the dials right, it starts to take off. That's how you know that when your problem changes from how do I cram this product down the throat of the potential consumer, that was your original problem, to, oh my gosh, so many people are wanting to eat this problem. They want to eat my services that I can't make the pizzas fast enough. I'm mixing metaphors like crazy today.
I was going to say, eat my service.
So that if that's the problem, that's what you're going for, and you got to tweak the dials until that happens. And if you haven't felt that in your business yet, where your biggest problem is the growth and expansion of your business, meaning you can't keep up with it, then you have not hit product market fit as tightly as you can.
So there's two things here which are very important caveats. One of them, I guarantee some people are listening being like, okay, well, good for you, Mike and Tom, that you've had, things take off like a rocket. But let me assure you, I definitely have had dozens, if not hundreds of failures along the way. I've been doing this for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
I've had more failures than I can count where I didn't understand product market fit, or I tried to find it and I failed and I just couldn't, get the market to give a crap.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've probably had the same, Mike, in your
Same.
journey.
We've spun off products. We've built digital products at my agency, spun those off as separate businesses, end up shutting them down because it doesn't find traction. So don't, and we're big about this, is about being honest and the open kimono. And this is something, just a side note, be super careful comparing your failure to the success of somebody else. Because Tom and I have both had failures and struggles in our careers. So don't compare your current struggle in your freelance business to the fact that, yes, my agency took off at one point in my agency. There were plenty of other failures from side projects and side initiatives that we had.
And as you say, even when you find success, you will continue to innovate and try new things. And no one has a track record. No band has all #1 hits. Mm-hmm. No sports person wins every single game. You will have failures. It's just about not dwelling, not getting stuck on them. So at Design Cuts, we tried a community forum and kind of didn't realize actually forums had their heyday a bit, and it was now more on social media. So I love forums from back in the day. I kind of knew what I was doing with them. We launched it. It didn't engage at scale the way we wanted, so we had to wrap it up. We've launched sections in our marketplace that have flown, and I'm thinking of a couple now which are just going crazy right now because the product market fits there. We've done other ones where we invested a bunch of time, got tons of products in there, and it did close to 0 sales.
Yeah.
So again, we've had to more or less wrap it up. So we're constantly hitting product market fit and failing to hit it. The difference is when something that doesn't work, you don't try and force it. You go, cool, didn't work. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's try something else. So that was point #1, and that's super important. The other thing is, I don't want people listening to think, okay, well, what I'm doing isn't working. Therefore, I'm going to have to try something else. And if that doesn't work after a week, I'm going to pivot and try something else and never stick to anything. Because it's finding that balance between, you need a lot of patience and perseverance and hard work, even with product market fit, to carve out success. So it takes experience to basically work out, well, do I not have product market fit and that's why I'm failing? Or is there potential product market fit and I just need to keep at it? And that's a really hard call to make.
Yeah. So how do people do that? What's the method? When do you decide to say, oh, forget it, this one's not going to hit, I've got to do a whole new idea? How do you know?
Well, it's so tough, right? And obviously I need to bring him up in the podcast, but Gary Vee, great example of this.
Because you haven't brought him up yet.
Yeah, it's been a while. I need to get in there. We'll wait for Dale Carnegie as well.
Okay, he's coming. People are taking shots all over the world right now.
Yeah, they are. I love it. There we go. So yeah, with Gary Vee, he's openly said what started his whole career was Wine Library TV. He became this viral hit on YouTube, built a huge business on the back of it. He always says he put out videos for 1.5 years and no one cared. Mm-hmm. No one watched it. So he could have given up and said, oh, well, there's no product market fit, or it's too early, or people don't care, or this YouTube thing doesn't work. I'm going to abandon it. So to be honest, I don't know if I have a clear-cut blueprint for how to make that call. A lot of it is just experience, gut feeling, paying attention to what happens in the market. I think one thing you can do is if anyone else out there is succeeding doing this thing, well, that kind of has pre-validated it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. And I think that, I don't know Gary Vee's numbers on the Wine Library TV initiative, but I would assume that it was growing steadily. It was not some giant boom. He was really early in YouTube marketing, especially marketing a product the way that he was doing. So it was super early on. he's notorious for pushing, for taking a line in the stand. Everybody go to Facebook. Everybody go to TikTok. And then he shows videos of him calling it out in 2009 that this is going to be the next thing. And then he's like, here we are. 11 years later, I told you back then. And you see those videos, but how many things did he do and try back in 2009 that are no longer working today or didn't work? You don't see that video.
But he talks about it. I think the famous one is like Yo Bongo or something he references. And there's been a bunch, and same with his investment strategy as well as social platforms. But I guarantee he didn't just tickle them for a week. He gave them a good commitment, and then it failed.
Okay, so we're talking about how long do you push before you decide to cut it off and say, okay, this isn't going to work. My recommendation is only risk what you have to risk. If you have time, then risk your time as long as you want. If it can be 5 years to push this idea and keep pushing it, because all you're really doing is leveraging your time against it. But if you're putting your life, your family's life, your ability to put food on the table because you're so passionately obsessed with the idea that, yes, this idea is going to work, and you push it to where you are completely broken, bankrupt, you have gone too far. So you've got to decide yourself, where do I draw the line? And I love the idea of putting a milestone out there that says, I'm going all in on this until X date. And if I don't have traction by that date, then scrap it. I'm going to go find a job. I'm going to change. I'm going to try the next business model. I'm going to do whatever. You got to set a timeline to work on this. Otherwise, it can be forever, like these people on Dragon's Den. Is that what they call it in the UK? Yeah. So it's like the people on Dragon's Den, Shark Tank, that go up there and say, I've been working on this for 10 years and I don't have any sales yet, but I believe in it. You don't want to be that person.
Well, it's like Will Smith in Pursuit of Happiness. He buys all that medical equipment, which becomes obsolete and dated, but he has to, pave the streets trying to flog it, trying to sell it to people, even though they don't want it because it's obsolete.
Yeah.
But he has no money. He's got all this stock that he's invested in, and he won't give it up. He would be much better trying to sell something that people actually want, but he keeps trying to sell them and he keeps failing, and his family become destitute. So that's like exactly what you just said not to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So what did he do? At a certain point, hit the milestone. At the point, in the story, what's his name? Chris Gardner, I think, is the name of the real person. Living homeless, peddling the scanners. Instead of going and getting a job somewhere to bring in some income, you're trying to get these bone density scanners off of your inventory until you drive yourself into homelessness. Now, that was a catalyst for him to say, I don't want this life. I'm going to do something better, and I'm going to outperform this. This is not who I am. And so that's the story of that, is him, that being the catalyst to his massive success afterwards. But man, that's a tough.
That actually is such a great metaphor though for this episode, because he was clearly incredibly intelligent and talented and became prolifically successful as a stockbroker. But if he was still pushing those bone density scanners today, he would still be failing. No matter how hard he worked and how smart he was, he would fail.
Okay, and let's spin that into a positive, because if you say, okay, what if the bone density scanners would have sold decently and supported his family just enough? Then he would still be selling bone density scanners today, and it never would have forced him into realigning his paradigm for his future and deciding, I am better than this life that I'm stuck in. So if your business isn't working, if you've been pushing this boulder up the hill and it's not working, you decide after listening to this, you know what, I've been fooling myself. I don't have product market fit. Don't sit there and say I'm a failure. Throw in the towel. Decide, you know what, I'm going to take the experiences I learned from this and I'm going to do better on the next one. I learned something from this experience, and I'm better than this failed initiative that I just tried. I'm going to make the next one work. And that's what the
And
story of Chris Gardner is. And he did, and achieved massive success as a result.
completely. And the same way you shouldn't tie your happiness and your ego to your Instagram likes, you equally shouldn't tie it to product market fit. Because if you're saying, well, this current venture is failing and no one wants what it is I'm selling, I must suck, I'm a failure. Well, you're in a bad spot then, because as we keep saying, you probably do have talent. In fact, most of the people I try and help with this, they're plenty talented. They just don't have
The
product market
best
fit. So
movie
don't
director,
think
the
product
best
market
movie
fit going
producers
wrong
ever
means that you suck.
have
It really
movies that
doesn't. It
don't
just
make
means you
money.
need
The
to keep
best
trying
author
something else.
ever has a book that Even the doesn't make best money, people that in doesn't the sell, world that doesn't take off, have a dud, that gets bad that reviews. happens. The best entrepreneur ever has in their wake dozens of failed businesses or failed initiatives in the wake of their success. So you're not alone in a struggling business. You're just one of the many, but the ones who fail are the ones who stop tweaking the dials, the ones who quit and say, you know what, forget it. I'm never going to be able to achieve this. That's real failure. So just stay in the game and keep tweaking the dials until you figure out the product market fit for the product you have, or a product market fit for a new product or service that you're going to launch.
And guess what? Your product market fit is not a lifetime guarantee. Like, we had product market fit at my company, and then suddenly one competitor started up every single week. People became a little bit blind to what it is we were offering, even though we were still the best in the world at it.
Yeah.
And even now, it does decently, but we pivoted our business model because we recognized the product market fit started to erode.
Yeah.
So that can happen too. You can work super hard. Yeah.
MySpace had product market fit.
Yep.
And where are they now? A non-existent social media platform. Now they still exist in embryo of what it was at one point, but a better product came into market with a better product market fit, and their business was wiped out overnight. MySpace's business.
Yeah, and I totally empathize how painful it is when it's not working, because I've been there. But at the same time, this is where the thick skin and the adaptability and flexibility of being an entrepreneur has to kick in. Because if you're there crying that no one wants what it is you're selling, you're done. I hate to say it. It's like, tougher stuff than that is going to happen. Like, Snapchat, when Instagram stories came along and just ruined them overnight. Like, it happens all the time. When Uber came along and put a bunch of cab drivers out of business, this stuff happens quicker than ever. Like, the market is ruthless out there, right?
Yeah.
And like I said before, it really doesn't give a crap about you. So the fact is, you're going to have to keep adapting, keep fighting, keep innovating, keep adjusting, keep tweaking the dials forever. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, that's kind of what you're signing up for.
That's awesome. Good summation. All right. Do we want to do a tennis match and knock through a few of these action points and takeaways?
Let's do it. I've written down nothing, partly because my left arm is crippled today after an injury. So I'll remember what I can. You might have to lead on this.
He's been whining like a little kid and grimacing throughout this episode in the video because his poor shoulder is hurt because he was doing pull-ups.
You see the level of sympathy that I get.
And he told me when we got on the call, he said, "Oh, I've had my arm in a sling for half the day." And then he puts it back on, and his sling it's like a bed sheet or something. What is this that you have wrapped around yourself?
I believe it's a colorful lady scarf.
Okay, good. So that's Tom's sling. It's good stuff.
It's incredibly warm around my neck as well.
I believe it.
It's serving its purpose as a scarf, maybe not a sling.
That's good. Well, it looks so fashionable on you for sure.
I make anything look chic, Michael. You
this. Do. All right. Why don't you kick us off? What is point number 1 on recap?
All right. Point number 1 is validation. use whatever you have at your disposal to validate your next idea or even your current idea to figure out if people want it. A tip we didn't mention on this was Instagram stories. I do it all the time. Let people use the polls in there and that kind of thing. Do you prefer this or this? And people are going to tell you which one stands out.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is research. Do some research and believe the research. How many potential clients are there, customers? How many of those potential customers can you realistically land? What percentage? How many of those what percentage of those potential customers has pain sufficient enough for them to purchase something to solve it? That's the questions you're asking yourself. But get the numbers and listen to the numbers and believe the numbers. Don't believe just your own hype.
Yeah, carrying on from that, don't bumble forward blindly just because you're passionate about something. It doesn't mean the market will be. So you need to think about commercial viability. Has this thing got any real legs as a business, or is it just something that should really be relegated to a hobby?
Mm-hmm. And then I think for me, the final one, unless you have another one, is you will know you hit product market fit if your problem becomes keeping up with demand rather than trying to cram your product or service down the throat of your potential customer.
I feel like we came up with about 15 more.
Well, they were all
shoddy note-taking,
ambiguous rambles in between these key points.
It's like, I'll try and keep you on track more next time.
All right, that's good. I think they were your rambles, and I was the one just trying to keep this whole thing honed in on a topic. All right, brother, you want to take us out?
Yeah, why not? We have had a absolute ton of reviews come in since we last recorded the show. And so we're going to be pushing them out probably on our social media and thanking people. Remember, do leave your Instagram handle or social media handle if you leave a review, because we do want to personally thank you. But blown away, incredibly kind. It really does help spread the word about the shows. Thank you a ton for that, guys. And also, we're still getting true fans messaging, right, Mike?
Oh, yeah. I love
Every
those.
week, a bunch
I
of them.
love
Yeah,
those.
they're so cool.
Yeah.
And
we've really
9.
connected with some of these people that have messaged us in a joint message. So it's been so fun for sure.
It's very cool. And I'm sure this has actually made me want to validate some podcast topics. So we should totally get some off our list of planned topic ideas and let people vote on them in the stories and say, would you rather we talked about this and this? Sometimes you get 50-50, but sometimes you get 80-20.
Yeah.
And you go, holy crap, people are 4 times more interested in that one. Let's do that. And you wouldn't have known unless you validated.
Great idea.
Cool. I think that's it from us. Mike is determined to try and be the bully of this pairing, people. He's doing the big brother thing with me, and I'm here for it. I kind of like it. So
it's good. I didn't bully you very hard on this one, but you bullied me yesterday in your Instagram post with the calling me out on thinking I'm so beautiful. And you know what? I can't help that I was born with these genetics. This is just who I am.
Yeah, it's luck of the draw. You've won the universe of the lottery.
It's so good. I'm so grateful. All right. Thank you, Biz Buddies. We love sharing this podcast with you. We appreciate you listening, and we will see you next week on the Biz Buds podcast.